Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Uncanny X-Men number 148, cover dated August 1981. The cover is entirely by Dave Cockrum, features a very interesting colour hold here for the shadow of this phantom figure in the foreground carrying Kitty Pryde. It's a very funky cover. The colours are very interesting here, polychromatic. And we have a focus on female characters: Spider-Woman, Storm, Kitty Pryde of course, and Dazzler as well. So the cover caption is "Dazzler and Spider-Woman to the rescue when Kitty falls to the shadow of death." Let's open this one up to the splash page. So this picks up with Cyclops and Lee Forster. They've been shipwrecked on an island in the middle of the Bermuda Triangle, and at the end of the previous issue, a mysterious island appeared out of nowhere, and so now they've gone to investigate. The title of this particular story is Cry Mutant, and the creative team is Chris Claremont writer, Dave Cockrum, and Josef Rubinstein artist. So that means that Rubinstein is finishing Cockrum's pencils. Janice Chang on letters rather than Tomor Zakowski, and Glynis Wine is the colorist rounding out the creative team. That's a very nice splash page. Great command of anatomy by Dave Cockrum. And of course, Cyclops has lost his ruby quartz lenses, which means he is in effect blind. He has to wear that blindfold and is unable to see. So he's got Lee guiding him there. I really like this overturned head of this statue and the angle there on the nose and the philtrum and the mouth. Very nicely done by Cockrum. And so Lee says, "I don't believe this. I don't want to believe it. Yesterday this island wasn't here. It didn't exist. And this city." And Scott says, "Anything is an improvement on that sandpit we came from. At least here we might find some food and water. You mentioned a city, Lee. What does it look like?" So we turn the page and we get a really great, a fantastic double page spread by Dave Cockrum here. Look at that. That is tremendous. And I love the choice of colours by Glynis Oliver. We've got this sea green blue, turquoise, and the red background is really effective with the green in the foreground. Very complementary, those two colours, red and green. So that is fantastic. And we've got this Cthulhu looking figure here in the foreground. Very, very interesting. And there's the statue that had fallen to the ground. So great command of continuity of space there by Cockrum, a very intelligent artist. And so here we have Lee and Scott making their way up these marble steps. And I like this little detail. Lee says to Scott, "Watch your step. These marble stairs are coated with seaweed. They're slippery." So I like that attention to detail in the dialogue from Claremont. This is interesting by Janice Chang, choosing to do the speech balloons on the diagonal with the panel borders. So Scott asks the question, are we in shadow? Suddenly it feels cold. She says it's partly that, but this city has such an alien feel to it. It gives me the willies. So who or what are the original denizens of this city? So then she says we've reached ground level, or level ground rather, some kind of boulevard. The statuary all relates to the sea. This could be a ceremonial gateway. Really like this mysterious city, this little mystery that we have at the opening of the story. And let's continue. So they make their way deeper into the city, and hours pass, and Scott all the while is worrying about his optic blasts and how it is that Lee hasn't asked him too much about it, and he's wondering whether he should reveal his affiliation with the X-Men, but he's got moral qualms over whether that would be fair to the other X-Men. So he says of Lee to himself in his thought balloon, "I don't want to lie to her. I'm not sure I can." So Lee is concerned about food, water, clothes. There's no people there, but she says we've got shelter in abundance. And then she turns to Scott and says, "Care to take advantage of it?" And she kisses him, but he pulls away from her. And she heard him say in the previous issue Jean's name. So Scott explains, "Her name was Jean Grey. We were in love. She died. I like you, Lee. I care for you too much, but it's too soon. I don't want to get involved again." So she gets very upset. And look, it's another Glynis Oliver classic trope here. In this moment of a heightened emotion, we have the red background. That is a classic move by Glynis Oliver. So Lee is upset and she says, I'm not asking for involvement. I know how you feel, Scott. I know about grief and loss. We buried my father 2 months ago, remember? And that was back in X-Men 144. So she runs away and Scott is left alone with his thoughts. So he's really handled that one very well. Interesting technique here in the background by Josef Rubinstein with the inks. Kind of a dry brush effect there in the background. So Scott now is alone. He is blindfolded. He trips over some of this broken statuary. And he's there thinking to himself, I don't know where I am, where I'm going, who or what is around me. And the irony is that I can see perfectly. All I have to do is open my eyes, which he does as he rips off the blindfold. With that, raw energy rips upward through the evening sky, a beam of force, irresistible, uncontrollable. Those mutant optic blasts have been Scott Summers' blessing and curse for most of his adult life. So he closes his eyes then. Great spotting of blacks here by Cockrum and Rubinstein as well. And the interesting question that I have, or it's interesting to me as it occurs to me, Scott's optic beams, they're powered by the sun. So his body, his mutant metabolism, soaks up solar rays and converts it into the optic beams, which are beams of force. But would it ever be possible for him to exhaust those optic beams? Like if he left his eyes open for 12 hours, would the beams run out? That's a question I have. What do you think about that in the comments to this video? Any thoughts on that? Any conjectures about whether he might ever run out of the optic beams or whether there's ever been a story where he has? In any case, he goes back to closing his eyes and putting the blindfold on. Meanwhile, Lee arrives and she is apologetic. She says, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have run out on you. I guess we both needed to blow off a little steam. And I mean, you know, it's an emotionally fraught situation. They're out of food and water and they're in this mysterious city. So then we've got them embracing here. I really like this panel. I like the command of anatomy here. You know, it's a little bit almost erotic even as well. The skin to skin contact, they're in very little in the way of clothing and garments, but it's a really nice image here. So they both apologize to each other. They both agree that they need each other. And then in the narrative caption, night passes and two lonely young people find peace in each other's arms, drawing what strength they can from their still fragile emotional bond, while trying not to think of what will happen to that bond in the future. Both are aware that the question may become academic if they don't soon find food and water. And then the scene switches to upstate New York and the X-Mansion and the grounds of the X-Mansion. And we have a little exercise going on in those grounds with Wolverine here. And he is hunting Nightcrawler in the woods. And this is really nicely done. And again, we've got that dry brush effect there by Josef Rubinstein as well. But you'll note on my particular edition of this comic, particularly if you're looking at this in high definition, something's gone wrong with the printing process here. So over here in the bottom right hand corner, the narrative caption there is so blurred with the inking, it's smudged, that it's hardly readable at all. So that's just one of the, what would I say, like consequences, not consequences, but something that was entailed by the printing process of the early 80s, that you could get these little errors in your comic. And that means that pretty much every comic that rolled off a printing press back in the 70s, 80s is in effect a unique object in and of itself. In any case, back to the story. Nightcrawler's up in the tree and he's hiding from Wolverine in the shadows because his indigo skin allows him to hide in shadow, and he thinks to himself, unglaublich, he disappeared, but where did he go? And so he teleports down from the tree to the ground, but he's surprised by Wolverine, who punches him in the sternum, pops his claws, and he buries them in the ground right beside Nightcrawler's head and says, you lose. So Wolverine says, shucks, I missed. He's being ironic. Scared you, didn't I? Serves you right, Kurt, after making a dumb butt move like that. So Kurt acknowledges he should have stayed in the trees. And this is cool. So in issue 141, the first part of Days of Future Past, there was a bit of tension between Wolverine and Nightcrawler regarding Mariko Yoshida. And now they're becoming friendly here. So Wolverine explains how he did it, how he hid from Nightcrawler. He says it's an old ninja trick. standing in plain sight without being seen. I learned in Japan. You know, Elf, I really enjoy these improvised training sessions a heck of a lot more than our workouts in the danger room, especially since the loser buys the beer. How many cases do you owe me now anyway? That's pretty cool. And I like the detailing on the bark of this tree here in the foreground as well. Just lots of work going into these pages by the art team Cockrum and Rubinstein. Meanwhile, inside in the X-Mansion, Wolverine is the topic of conversation. Angel doesn't like him, thinks he's a little psychopath, thinks he's dangerous, and doesn't want to be on the team with Wolverine. So he says, I'm at the point where I'm not sure I want to belong to any outfit that has Wolverine as a member. In the meantime, Storm became aware that her subconscious was producing a storm out there in the upper atmosphere. So she gets control of her emotions and uses her power to calm down the storm. So that's firmly established now that Storm, if she doesn't have complete control of her emotions, her subconscious will manifest in bad weather. That's interesting. So Storm here is on Wolverine's side and says regarding Wolverine's violent nature, she abhors it, but he's not an X-Man because of his perfect sterling character. It is because of his potential for good. Our duty as X-Men is to help him achieve that potential. To deny Wolverine would be to deny our true reason for being. Why does Angel not understand that? That's a nice little moral perspective there that Claremont writes into Storm's point of view. And I like the way that every character, every X-Man has an individual voice and an individual perspective on other team members and on what the team is and what its purpose is. And then we're lower down in the X-Mansion where Banshee, Sean Cassidy, is working on the modified SR-71, the Blackbird, that is the X-Men's private jet. And Illyana Rasputin is down there as well, and Colossus too. So Colossus helps him with this piece of equipment. And Nightcrawler arrives. And I like the little detail here where Illyana holds her nose, because Nightcrawler, when he teleports, there is a smell of brimstone, which is sulfurous and which smells like rotten egg, in fact. And so I like that little storytelling detail there by Cockrum in the art. So Nightcrawler teleports away. And of course, as I've said before in these videos covering Cockrum's issues of Uncanny X-Men, his return after John Byrne left to do Fantastic Four, Nightcrawler is his favourite character. So you're always going to see a lot more with Nightcrawler when Cockrum is the artist. So the professor has asked Sean to come up to one of the rooms upstairs in the X-Mansion, and there is this girl there waiting for him with a letter, and she identifies herself as Teresa Rourke. And she's got a letter from Black Tom Cassidy. And the narrative caption explains he's a rogue, and he and Sean are old bitter foes. Yet Banshee never doubts the truth of what he reads. He'd married young for love, and they'd had a glorious honeymoon together before duty summoned him away. When he returned, Maeve Rourke Cassidy was dead. So the letter explains that this is his niece, or not his niece rather, but his daughter. So this is a reuniting of father and daughter, and Professor X has been, what would I say, he's been eavesdropping telepathically, but at this point when he realizes that the reunion has been a happy one, he pulls back, and the whole of the team there is delighted too that all of that has worked well. Spider-Woman's here on board at the X-Mansion because the X-Men and Spider-Woman have just had a recent adventure in issue number 38 of her title. But Moira is the only person, Moira McTaggart is the only person who's unhappy. And so she says that she wants to step out for some air. And Storm goes out to ask her what's up. So Moira explains, and I like this from Claremont, this bit of characterization. So he's got an attunement to the fine details of emotional relationships. So Moira, who is Banshee's lover, says, I'm glad for Sean. Yet I'm also frightened and jealous and a wee bit ashamed. I love him, he loves me, but now he has someone else to love. I see Teresa as a rival. And Storm understands because she sees Stevie Hunter, Kitty's dance teacher, introduced in Uncanny X-Men 141, also as a rival. And Moira continues and says, Teresa represents something I can't give Sean a child. And this is interesting too. So Moira here says she had one and he turned into a mutant monster. So that was Proteus, and that storyline goes back to Uncanny X-Men 125 to 128. I daren't have another is her feeling at the minute. Sean says it doesn't matter to him, but it does to me. So that's interesting. And then the scene switches to Lower Manhattan, a side street, and this hand emerging, lifting up the manhole cover, and this figure from the cover in a cloak and wearing a hat and in deep silhouette emerging and referring to himself as Caliban. It has been so long since Caliban has seen the sky. So this is the first appearance of Caliban the Morlock, and he says, but in advance of the Morlocks becoming a thing. And so he has this kind of power of empathy, kind of an emotional sensitivity, and he senses people. Caliban senses people, but none are nearby. Caliban must be careful, though they will chase him. If they see him, they will try to kill him. Caliban fears, but Caliban is so lonely. He senses his own kind so near, so strong there in that building. Caliban will find them and they will be his friends forever. So this skyscraper here, we turn the page, and this is where we're going to be now for the rest of the issue. And it turns out it's a ladies' night out. So we've got Storm there in this very interesting floral pattern, or is it floral or foliage pattern dress that she's wearing. Spider-Woman, Jessica Drew, Stevie Hunter, Kitty's dance teacher. So Storm obviously making an attempt to be friendly with Stevie, and Kitty herself. And they're at this club at the top of the skyscraper called Infinity. And the person that's going to be playing tonight is Dazzler. So this is very interesting from Claremont. The rest of the issue is going to focus, except for the very last couple of pages, is going to focus on this group of 5 women. And that would have been unusual for comics at the time, but it is a characteristic of Claremont's approach to writing comics, that he always foregrounds the female characters and makes them interesting, makes them agents in their own right, very different from the damsels in distress they were or would have been in the very early Silver Age comics. So this is interesting stuff from Claremont. So everybody's enjoying themselves so far. Kitty's a little bit nosy regarding Jessica Drew. She asks her, Miss Drew, are you really a private investigator? What kind of cases do you investigate? Do you carry a gun? So Storm says, Kitten, calm down. You're pushing. There's a fine line between youthful exuberance and rudeness. And I just crossed it. She asks, and Stevie says, you're close, kiddo. So in any case, we pick up with Caliban. He's made his way to the entrance of the nightclub, and here he is in dark silhouette. And the guards here are surprised by him. And what happens next? Let's get past the advertisements. Well, they draw their sidearms on him, and he uses his powers against them. And we get an explanation of his powers here. Emotions swirl like riptides around Caliban. He absorbs them all, silently screaming at the agony they cause him as he converts their power into a palpable physical force and hurls them back at the guards. So that's interesting. So that's Caliban's power. He has powers of empathy, but he can also absorb emotion and hurl it back as a force. And that's what he does with the guards. But one of them gets a shot off, and Jessica imagines that she hears that shot. But Kitty says, shush, you two. They're introducing Dazzler. So Dazzler arrives on stage. She's still wearing that John Romita Jr. designed costume that even in 1981 looks incredibly dated. And she's singing her heart out there. And we get all the information about her real name, Alison Blair, and all the rest, and her powers to convert sound into light. And then Caliban arrives in the club itself. And finally, Storm hears, or rather Jessica hears the screams. Something's happening at the other end of the club. So Kitty impulsively, maybe foolhardily, ducks under the table and phases down into the elevator shaft of the building. And between phasing down through the floor and into the elevator shaft, she also changes into her costume. So we get that here in the narrative caption, having changed into her X-Man costume, hidden in a secret compartment in her purse. Wow. So these costumes must be able to be folded up really small. Intriguing. Where was she keeping the boots, though, is what I want to know. In any case, she also uses her powers to airwalk here. So she thinks, as she's falling down the elevator shaft, wait, my mutant abilities don't just give me the power to phase through solid objects. If I concentrate hard enough, I can literally walk on air. And we saw her do that in issue 143, where she faced that demon on Christmas Eve. So Claremont developing Kitty's powers and her command of her powers over the course of these issues too. So then back up with the women in the nightclub, and they're debating about what to do next. But they need a distraction. So Dazzler twigs to the fact, she sees Storm and the concern on Storm's face. So she uses her talents to improvise she improvises off a wild guitar riff and launches into a series of complex arpeggios. So with that distraction, the women are free to move from the table unobserved. Storm creates a pea soup fog and they change into their costumes. And Kitty realizes that the people up in the club are panicking, and that shadow must be the reason why. It's huge, and those eyes glowing, burning into my mind. So I'm not quite sure what the shadow is. That isn't explained in the narrative captions, and I wonder, was that something that surprised Claremont here in the art, that he didn't know quite what Cockrum meant by the shadow? And in any case then, Kitty is grabbed by Caliban, by the hand, by the wrist actually, and he says, "You are like Caliban, you will come with him, stay with him, be his friend." What I don't understand is why Kitty doesn't phase out of his grasp. I'm not sure. My only explanation is, and you can tell me what you think in the comments to the video, is that she's so frightened that she's unable to use her power. That's all I can come up with. Or that in some way he is counteracting her power, using his power over emotion to do that, but it's not explained in the narrative caption, so it's unclear how it is that he's managed to grab Kitty and hold on to her. So Storm and Spider-Woman arrive and they go after Caliban, but he knocks Storm down using his power, of course, it would seem. Or does he throw? No, he simply throws some things at her. He throws a vase of flowers at her. It seems hard to believe that would stop Storm. Spider-Woman thinks Storm's unhurt. That table merely knocked the wind out of her. So long as Caliban holds Kitty, I daren't unleash a full power venom blast. The bioelectrical energy bolts might kill her. Strong as Caliban seems to be, she thinks. And we continue. And again, look at that red background here. Classic Glynis Oliver trope for a moment of heightened emotion. So Spider-Woman continues after Caliban. I've no alternative but to wade in and to match him punch for punch. But Caliban punches her in the jaw and out the side of the window of the building. And then he descends down the elevator shaft holding onto the wires. That's pretty cool. That's nicely told visually by Cockrum. And then up in the discotheque itself, Dazzler realizes the patrons are all panicking and somebody might be killed. So this is very interesting from Claremont, where he has Dazzler think, my band split with everyone else, but I can get the music I need from the club's master sound system. I can't simply dazzle the crowd. I don't want to short circuit their brains and stun them. That would leave them helpless. My lightning has to create a specific emotional mood. I've never tried that kind of precise control before. I've always just let things happen. I don't know if I can do it. But she does, she achieves it. And that's something that Claremont picks up on again in his last treatment of Dazzler in Uncanny X-Men 261, where she taps back into that idea and uses her power in that particular fashion to calm people down and to create a very specific mood. So that's interesting. Claremont has that idea here and he uses it again in 261. So Storm goes down the elevator shaft, and of course her claustrophobia begins to impact on her. She has a claustrophobic attack, a bad one. The fear is almost overwhelming, she thinks to herself. If it shatters my concentration, I'll lose control over the winds that hold me aloft. I'll fall to my death. So she's panicking as she's going down the elevator shaft. Spider-Woman recovers from being punched out the window. Asks Stevie, where's Caliban? So Stevie gives her directions to head, that he dropped down the elevator shaft. So Spider-Woman recognizes that he must be out on the street. So as he's leaving the building there, she drops down on him. End of the line ugly, she says. So she attacks him and uses a venom blast against him. But he knocks her into the wall. Caliban is tired of living alone, he says. All he wants is a friend, one to talk to care for, to love. Is that so much to ask for? And he rips up a street light lamp and is getting ready to attack Spider-Woman with it. But he's stopped by Storm, who uses a lightning bolt against him. So she managed to get out of the elevator shaft and knock some sense into Caliban. Also, Kitty comes to, so it seems she fainted, and she's mortified about that. So still, she's a neophyte X-Man in need of training. And now we get finally a good look at Caliban's face. So he's got this monstrous, almost skull-like face here, and he's frightened that they're going to kill him. And of course, they say that it was never their intent to do that, to hurt him or to kill him. And they realize that he's a mutant. And so he says here, Caliban does not understand your words. He felt your presence in his mind, in his heart, like a great shining light. It drew him out of his underworld home. He could not help himself. Caliban did not wish to cause anyone harm. He thought he was unique, but when he sensed others like himself, the thought of returning to the underworld, of living forever alone, became unbearable. So he's sorry. So this is interesting. Storm offers friendship, and she says, we've all acted hastily tonight, but there's still time to begin afresh. Then the police sirens sound, and Professor X's Rolls Royce is parked nearby. So Storm is of the opinion that they bring Caliban back to the X-Mansion, but he's gone already. He's disappeared once more into darkness alone, says Spider-Woman. And now the ladies are back up enjoying their champagne, no doubt, back in the club. All's well that ends well. And Storm's, but they're thinking about Caliban and thinking about his fate. And Spider-Woman says that she wouldn't wish such a fate on anyone. Storm agrees. And in the narrative captions, it's interesting. Kitty here is thinking to herself. We get it here. Kitty listens in silence. Her own thoughts deep and somber. Since first meeting the X-Men, she's always felt uncomfortable around Nightcrawler, not because of his personality, but solely because of his appearance. Tonight's encounter with Caliban has shown her the cost of such an attitude. She hopes with Nightcrawler it isn't too late to try to make amends. So that's the beginning of a new relationship between Kitty and Nightcrawler that will develop into the one we saw that Kate Pryde had with Nightcrawler back in issue 141. And then we switch back to the Bermuda Triangle and the mysterious city. It's the next morning, and Cyclops and Lee are still worried about getting food to fill their stomachs. And then they have a mysterious figure in silhouette there with those two little horns on top of that round silhouette. Who could it be? I thought my island was deserted, says the voice. How pleasant to discover that I was mistaken. And Cyclops recognizes the voice. It can't be. And Lee is delighted, and she says, oh man, are we glad to see you? But Scott is horrified. Lee, whatever you do, he thinks, don't mention my name. If he hears that, if he heard me refer to my optic blasts, if he even suspects who I truly am, we're both as good as dead. So who could it be? Let's turn the page. Well, it's Magneto. Fantastic. That's a really great image of Magneto. Lovely stuff. And look at that, the Cthulhu head there as well. Interesting stuff. So Magneto says, I bid you welcome to my new home. Though your arrival was unanticipated, I shall do all I can to ensure that your stay is as pleasant, as possible. So does Magneto recognize Cyclops or not? well, we'll have to discover in subsequent issues. So there you go. I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on Uncanny X-Men 148. Let me know what you think of the issue itself in the comments to this video. And if you enjoyed my review, please like the video on YouTube. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.